Because you know there's a handful of people actually run everything. That's true. It's provable. Not
It's all
conspiracy.
about control. To them we just cattle, numbers, battling each other while they creeping in the shadows, scheming, plotting, clocking your every move, locked in your mind, brainwashed until it's rotten. Got the population operating as they want them, symbolically mocking them, thinking nothing can stop them. So open your eyes to the lies of the evil, the poison in the minds and the lives of your people. And every time they lead you down a line to deceive you, and by then it's always too late to see through the veil that they hide behind, cause your third eye is blind. Better take a stand, we running out of time. Ain't nobody coming to save us, fuck what you had in mind. Arm yourself with the truth and jump behind the battle line. Can we turn it around? Yeah, it's possible. Divided we'll all fall, but united we're unstoppable. This is for the world, this is for the masses, attached to the strings being pulled by puppet masters. This is for the youth, searching for the proof, keep on looking for the clues, I'll provide you with some truth. This is for the ones waking up from the spell, beginning to discover themselves. Yeah, this is for the youth, searching for the truth, keep on looking for the clues, I'll provide you with some proof. Hey yo, the stage is set, the game is rigged, the system isn't broken, it was designed this way, and only the blind obey, give their mind away to these political, parasitical, cynical, criminal-minded individuals, getting you to surrender your freedoms to the hands of the state, with every boogeyman they create, playing they order out of chaos in order to enslave us, distorted our brains to morally degrade us, faces off against each other while they move the pieces on the global chessboard, directing the hordes. I don't come to bring peace, I was sent with a sword, a truth to get you mentally ready for war. Step forth if you got the balls to call out these tyrants, or submit your compliance through silence, cause in this filthy system ain't a single soul to trust. It ain't right versus left, it's a state versus us. This is for the world, this is for the masses, attached to the strings being pulled by puppet masters. This is for the youth, searching for the proof, keep on looking for the clues, I'll provide you with some truth. This is for the ones waking up from the spell, beginning to discover themselves. Yeah, this is for the youth, searching for the truth, keep on looking for the clues, I'll provide you with some proof. This is for the world. Yeah.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is James Cordiner, and you are watching A Hitchhiker's Guide to Truth, hopefully on onegreatworknetwork.com or freeyourmindne.com. If you'd like to join the chat, come on over to freeyourmindne.com/live. You can hop in the chat there, or you can watch on Odyssey for sure. We'll never be censored over there. So, with that being said, I do have my regularly scheduled weekly housekeeping to do. So we're going to do that now. And hopefully, yeah, here we go. Okay, this is a drawing that my son did. And I wanted to share this with all of you this week because he's awesome. And that's that's the family portrait. So there. And now we have some other stuff to go over. All right, so coming up in September, we have the Freedom Under Natural Law Conference, Funnel 2, and that's going to be on September 10th and 11th, 2022. This time around, it's called, as a subtitle, it's called Convergence, Unity, Focus, Action. An amazing lineup of speakers, a couple of which are going to be at the Shattering the Illusion conference, and one of which is joining me tonight. His name is Brandon Martin. We're going to bring him in a second. So we have Shattering the Illusion. That's the conference that Joe Murray and I are co-organizing. And as you can see, it's a one-day online event about natural law, true anarchy, consciousness, mind control, and the occult. That's going to be on September 24th, 2022. We have an amazing lineup of speakers at this conference as well. We have Chris Jansen, Ivan Oyola Jr., myself, James Cordiner, Jennifer Rose, Joe Murray, Mark Devlin, Mark Passio, Nathan Redette, Sean McCann, and Will Keller. Diesel Automatic is going to be featuring Joe Murray on a brand new track dedicated to the conference. And everything else that you want to learn about the conference, you can find it at shatteringtheillusion.com. enlightenment.info. So go on over to that website and check out everything else that you need to know about this amazing conference. And that's all I got to do for the housekeeping items for this evening. But I do want to address one problem before I bring the guest in. And it's not usually like me to do this these days, but I still got to do it. Like, I just want to let everybody out there that watches this show know that this is my show. And I'm going to do it the way that I like to do it. I'm going to do the housekeeping each week the way that I like to do it. However repetitive some people that watch this show find it to be. I'm not trying to drive away viewers because I want people to find value in the information that I and my guests are putting forward each week. But not every episode is the same. And I do not have a start from episode 1 type of podcast. Each guest brings an audience of their own with them each week. That is why I choose to go over the same housekeeping each week, because there are new people watching the show each week. So that's about as much explanation that I even have to give, if I even have to give any of it at all. I do not like to have to come out and speak this way to people that like watching the show or give me a chance to help them learn something new. But the criticism or the advice does not fall on deaf ears, but it's not needed. So take it somewhere else. With that being said, I would like to bring in my guest now. So we are joined by Brandon Martin tonight. Brandon, dude, what's going on, man? I'm happy that you're here. I'm happy that we're getting to meet and we get to talk about some crazy cool stuff, man. What's up?
Yeah, thank you so much for the honor of being able to come onto your show. I've been really enjoying everything that you've been putting out there, especially the episode with Mark and all the work you've been doing before that, and, you know, Shattering the Illusion conference. That's looking really amazing. I thought it was interesting, kind of synchronistic, that I did my last presentation was called Sight Beyond Illusion. And every time I read that, it kind of reminds me of that. And I'm like, hell yeah, you know, I really get excited about that. But yeah, I'm real excited to be here. It's great. And it's really nice to finally to meet you and finally talk to you.
Dude, the pleasure, the honor's all mine. For real. It's all on this side of the screen tonight, because dude, before we really begin, like, your background with, you know, I don't want to talk about this all night, you know, but I just want to make sure that I say that your background and your father and Skatopia and everything, for a long time, it kind of was breathing hope into my world, because I grew up skateboarding and kind of getting pushed around a little bit because of it in the area that I grew up. For some reason, there were older kids that, you know, would call me terrible names and and like kind of beat me up a little bit, and they'd break my skateboards and stuff. And I remember back when there was the show Viva La Bam, and they went to Skatopia. And it was like back like 2004 or 2005 or like way back then. And I saw Skatopia for the first time. And then when 88 Acres of Anarchy, the documentary, came out, and your father was kind of explaining the idea behind Skatopia, it sounded like a safe haven for skateboarders. But you come there and just like skateboard and help take care of the property and do your part. And like, you know, kind of just I at one point in time wanted to go out and be like, yeah, I'll be cool there. Like, all I have to do is skateboard and not kill anybody, and I'll be cool there, you know, basically.
Right.
So, and it was one of the first times I really ever heard about anarchy. And however much of an understanding as it was providing for me at the time, it was one of the first times in my life back in the day, like over like 15 years ago now, that I ever really heard about anarchy and what it really kind of is in one respect. Not so much all of the philosophical enlightening parts of it, where, you know, what kind of hard work really goes into it, but kind of more of a praxis of it, if you will, where you're actually living in the light of an anarchist kind of, you know, compound. And it was eye-opening. And I don't know, I wanted to kind of thank you for what you do with Skatopia these days, even as hard of a job as it might be. And I wanted to, like, through you, kind of give thanks to Bruce wherever he is today, which we don't have to get into that, but I know you covered that at one point. But yeah, just thank you for everything that you do, you know. So
you're very welcome, and I'm sure Bruce would be to hear that as well. You know, it's a really interesting for me. You know, I came up in the punk community. I came, you know, just traveling around the world, living in cars, surfing the couch, you know, going to skateboard competitions, going to shows. I got to see Gigi Allen before I was like 7 or 8. You know, so I was really involved in a lot of the underground and kind of mid-level areas of punk and skateboard industry. And, you know, growing up around that really gave me a perspective in those areas, especially in the psychological realm of like what's going on with those types of freedom movements, right? And, you know, my dad kind of just got together with a bunch of other skaters, and then, you know, they wanted to get away from all the regulations, all the order followers, all the, you know, restrictions and oppression, and they just wanted to be able to skate. They just want to be able to live free and have their own place and not have people come and cause any harm, and, you know, not be affected by the outside oppression as much as possible. And that's kind of what he did. And he kind of, you know, eventually marketed that and turned it into Skatopia. And then, you know, like you said, we got affiliated with Viva La Bam. Tony Hawk came out. We even had a few TV shows on Blue Torch, MTV, ourselves, like Real TV, a bunch of stuff like that. And then they made the documentary, and the documentary was interesting because, you know, it was a strange time period at that phase of Skatopia. It was like right in the middle of like where we're trying to find our footing with anarchism and like trying to keep the business going there in a certain way, because it's really hard living out here. You want to be able to put out the knowledge of freedom. You want to be able to live free, but also you got to be able to make money at some level, the mind control money, and so that you can do the things you want to do. Luckily, most of our place was done by DIY. You know, a lot of people came in, they contributed, they just wanted to donate, they just wanted to help out. And that's one of the cool things I learned there, is that if you get out there and you do the work, if you put it into action, it's something my dad was really still is good at. If you can get that community built and that trust built with the people, they will come and help. You know, they will get art helping. And that's kind of how Skatopia was developed, which is people coming in, donating ramps, donating supplies here and there, donating their time. And as long as you came out, and it's that way today, just do no harm, you know, don't come out and start it. Then you can come and do, you know, whatever you like, as long as you're not violating anybody. So it's very interesting. And we just had an event actually just a few weeks back, and it was really amazing. We had a really good lineup of bands, a lot of good people, and I think I've seen more authentic anarchists there than I ever have, actually. So it was really cool to see that.
that's awesome, man. That's really uplifting that, like, you know, even through all the tough times of having, because I was doing some research on the kind of the transfer of Skatopia from Bruce to you, and I was doing a little research. I found some interviews that you guys took place, that you took part in, and how you were trying to like rein it in a little bit to make it more of a not so dangerous environment where people could essentially, you know, you got to kind of rein it in a little bit, you know, because you don't want anyone getting extremely, you know, damaged or hurt out there. It helps smooth things over and keep things going for the long run. If you can say, hey, don't light off fireworks in the barn, stop lighting cars on fire, and, you know, maybe cool it with the handguns.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know,
One of the things that I really worked at was trying to cut back the hedonism. You know, I was trying to cut down the hedonistic behavior and just have common sense understanding of decency and living in harmony with nature, you know, just living in harmony with objective morality. And what I noticed is that most of the people that came there, because of the fame that was taking place, was that they were mostly, just like all of us at some level, were very socially engineered to behave these ways, because this is the way that the image that has been programmed into their mind about what anarchy means, about what rebellion means in their own minds, and that's what they thought it actually meant, which is do whatever you want without any consequences. And it's like it actually counteracted what they wanted out there, because they say they love the place, but then they do behaviors that destroys the place they love or the community they love. And then it's like, what are you doing? Like, this doesn't make sense. So I had to grow up in that, and I took a step back, and I was like, oh man, like something has to shift there. So I had as a TBI patient, so he has a lot of psychological issues from that. It's like dealing with someone with shell shock, and from there I was like, well, I'll step in and try to do whatever I can to kind of cooperate and uplift the place. And I noticed a big shift, from people who just wanted to come and be the inauthentic anarchists, just to burn cars and and do whatever the hell they want, and then next thing I know, it's like people coming back that it was like at the beginning. So they were coming back in, and they just wanted to help build. They just want to skate. They just want to have a community. So it was really good. And we've always had a mix of those types of people, like really authentic people and then inauthentic people. Usually the inauthentic came in during the times of the event. 98% of the time, it's just a really chill atmosphere, just a farm, 88 acres, some animals out there growing some food. It's like not much is actually going on out there most of the time. So it's not thrilling as a lot of people might make it out to be from the media portrayal of it, because everybody focuses on the events that take place, the bowl bash and that stuff. So I've always had this thing about the rumors that have stirred up from it. It's like, oh, that's going on out there all the time, that's going on 24/7. Man, you couldn't sustain that. It's ridiculous,
No,
like,
if you keep up with you on like Facebook or some sort of social media or whatever, you see the pictures. It's like, no, you're like repairing half pipes and bowls all the time. You're like tending to the land, like making sure that it's like that it's livable and just living your life out there. I see it all the time. I'm always like, this is awesome. Like seeing, it's like a behind the scenes kind of, a little look, a little looking behind the scenes kind of aspect of it all. It's really interesting. It's like always puts a smile on my face when I see you out there with your crew, and you guys are like repairing a half pipe or whatever. It's like always fascinating to me. And it's like this, like, okay, this is the real deal. It's not just like, like, no, like true rebellion. It takes principles. It takes, it takes a firm understanding, and, to understand something, we know like through like green language, it's like, you understand it. You're going to live according to it, and you stand true to your principles, and you don't slack on them. I know plenty of supposed anarchists that have the burn the fucker to the ground mentality. They listen to a little too much of the wrong kind of music, or that Against Me song, Teenage Anarchist, like in the whole chorus is just like, don't you remember when you were young and you wanted to set the world on fire? Like, yeah, I remember being 15 and being angry because everybody I knew let me down, and I wanted to rebel and all this other stuff. I remember that, but there comes a time to grow up, and there comes a time to like take the next step, which is kind of what we're here to talk about tonight, which is, these pillars of enlightenment, where we have the non-aggression principle, we have the self-defense principle, and maybe even some hidden ones in there. I'm thinking about like care and, all these different, how they work together. And I wanted to talk to you more about that because of what you like. It kind of makes sense with what you do out there and I've seen your presentation material, and I think that you are the perfect person to talk with about this material. So why don't we change gears and just get into the heart of the topic tonight? What do you think?
Sounds good. I'm ready.
All right. So all right, let's take it away. I'd like to start with, first of all, talking about the non-aggression principle, because to me, this is one that at this at this point in time, I think we really need to try to help people understand because of the amount of aggression that is out there. So, where do you always start with people when it comes to like the non-aggression principle? Because where I always start is it seems like we have to start talking to people about what their rights are, like what is right and wrong, because through that knowledge, you'll be able to kind of discern what acts are actually aggression. So you want your take on that? Take it away. Take as much time as you want.
Yeah, I would say that we have to be able to start at the foundation of the epistemological understanding of truth. And then from there, once you can get through to somebody what objective truth actually is, that it actually exists, that it is a discoverable thing in nature. And there, then you can move on to morality. Because without having a foundation in truth, then morality can just be whatever. Maybe it's non-existent to them. Maybe they're amoral, or maybe they're more relativist. Maybe they don't have any concept of that morals are actually an innate function of behavioral consequences that take place with social transactions. So yeah, I always start there with truth, and then I move forward into objective morality, because most people don't even believe in truth. A lot of people are solipsistic. This was what I talked about on the last podcast I did with Fred, and it was just a podcast. But most people believe that, or postmodern, right? They're postmodern idea that truth is just something changeable. It's malleable, it's mutable, so you can do whatever you want with it, or there's no such thing as it at all. And one thing about that is that it's a contradiction in the ideology. First of all, to say that it's true that there's no such thing truth is a contradiction, and it doesn't hold up. It's a self-defeating argument. So if it's true that there's no such thing as truth, then there actually is such thing as truth. If it's true that there is such thing as truth, then it is true. So no matter which way you go with, you end up back at truth. And I don't think people think about what they're thinking. They don't think through. They're not conscious of their thought process. And they're just running with whatever programs they have coming from the subconscious level. And one reason why is because they get away with whatever they want with their behaviors, right? They want to do whatever they feel that they can get away with in society. And one thing about that is they don't want to accept responsibility for the consequences of dealing with the knowledge that there is such thing as objective truth and that there is such thing as objective morality, because then they have to take a look at themselves and say, oh, maybe I am the problem. Maybe I need to change myself. Maybe I need to do shadow work. Maybe I'm not, as good of a person as I perceive myself as, by supporting and condoning acts of violence, or just saying that they're irrelevant in society. But yet, talk to people, you find out, as you start to deconstruct this with them, you find out that they do believe in some forms of objective morality or objective truth. For example, if you can talk to people about rape, and I do this all the time, I always bring up the rape concept. I say, do you think rape is universally a wrong? And 100% of the time I get, yes, universally a wrong. Well, that presuppositional idea there is based upon objective morality. It's universal, it's unchangeable. It doesn't matter what culture you're growing up in, doesn't matter time, location, or place that you're at. It has nothing to do with that. It's always universally a wrong. And from there, you're like, okay, well, then that's an objective truth as well. So, you kind of have to use some reverse psychology with people when it comes to getting through people, because you're digging deep into subconscious programs that have been there. And I think that they're epigenetically wired into us. This is something that I point out a lot. I think slavery is epigenetically wired into us now, where that's why it's such a force that's so hard to deal with in people's minds, because they have this environmental condition that we've been experiencing for tens of thousands of years, probably longer than that. And it's been, epigenetically conditioning us accept that as a natural state of being. And that's why I think it's really, really hard to get through to people, even if they do have some semblance of morality and some semblance of conscience, right? So once I get through to them on that, then I start to move into rights, and I move into what is a right, right? Because usually you'll always hear people talk about it, and you'll hear people say, well, here are my rights, right? And they'll list out, and it gets pretty ridiculous with that, obviously, because they don't even know what a right actually is. They don't have the concept of what the right or wrong actually is. So from there, once you can get through to them about what a right is, which is an action that does not cause harm to any sentient being, it does not violate liberties or freedoms of any other sentient being in the universe, no matter what sentient being it is, then I move into the pillars of enlightenment, which is, like you brought up, the first pillar would be the non-aggression pillar. And that's something you find in the New Age community, obviously, the non-aggression principle, right? So a lot of the people in the New Age community got that right. They have that correct. They tend to, and that doesn't mean that everything there is correct, obviously, but they got at least that part right. But they lack on the other part, which we'll get to here in a minute. But I call it the first pillar, and many others have called it the first pillar of enlightenment. And it's a sacred feminine pillar, because it's the non-violent, concept. So I also call it the non-violent principle, right? Because harm is kind of ambiguous. That term harm is kind of ambiguous. As a skater, I know that I can consent to harm. That's okay. But a lot of people take that as an absolute, because like when I go skate, I'm going to get hurt when I skate, like I do certain activities, I know that I'm going to harm myself in that activity. So harm can be very ambiguous. That's why I like to use the word violence, because then we understand that it means a violation of somebody else's rights or liberties or somebody else's, sovereignty. So the first pillar is the sacred feminine pillar of nonviolence. And this pillar states, do not initiate immoral activities, transactions, or behaviors towards sentient beings. Do not initiate the non-rightful use of physical or violence to coerce, constrain, or manipulate the rightful physical behaviors or free will choices of other sentient beings. And in Freemasonry, this pillar happens to be the Corinthian pillar, which is on the right side of the first degree tracing board. And that happens to be the sacred feminine principle. So it has a lot to do with the heart-based care. It has a lot to do with empathy, compassion, knowing that you don't want to actually make somebody else or something else suffer with your behaviors. And that's a very, very important part. That's where we always want to start at. That's the foundation, is that we don't want to actually initiate any more suffering into the world. We already have enough suffering in this world. We don't need to contribute that in any way, shape, or form, right?
Yeah, we definitely don't. Which is like something that I concentrate on a lot when I talk to people, because it's something that it's almost like using the Socratic method, where you run through these paces with people and you're asking questions that lead them down the path to figuring it out for themselves. It's something that I find to be an extremely useful tool if done correctly. And something else that you said about clarifying ambiguity is, I find that extremely important as well, because it like I just said, clarifying the ambiguity, it just takes all of the confusion and the obfuscation right out of the picture, where it's something that I disagree with some people on as well. Not going to name any names, but people that say the initiation of harm, where it's I like how you're defining it with no, the initiation of violence, because that word violence kind of creates a more visceral reaction in people, and they understand that more than harm. So when you're saying something like harm, well, what do you mean harm? Like, you just being a jerk? Harm, you could just say some harmful words, like you could call somebody some names. Yeah, that's kind of harmful. You're gonna make someone go, like you're gonna
Right.
you're gonna slam the door in some old lady's face entering the grocery store. Like, you didn't hurt her, but that's like, you're just being an asshole. Like that. These things can be considered harmful, sure, but are you really? You're just being an ass, But if you're initiating violence, now that creates a reaction in people's minds.
Right. It does.
Correctly defining things is extremely important, because people like to do the mental gymnastics to see how much they can get away with. It's very simple. It's a very simple way of like explaining the transgressions against natural law. And that's where that's the definition of violence. You don't steal. Like we all know, it boils down to the one. Just don't fucking steal. Anything that can be equated with theft, don't do it, because that is violence. So it takes all of the ambiguity, all of the obfuscation right out of the picture. And that is where the funneling of knowledge, the hard line of knowledge, and when it comes to the non-aggression principle, happens with people, is being able to just adequately and effectively communicate the transgressions against natural law to them is the explanation of violence. And if they can just go, oh yeah, that makes sense, I don't want to do anything like that, and it's like, okay, then live how you say you want to live. That's the next step. And then it's like, well, what if somebody does that to me? Well, good news. There's some good news on the horizon for you then, because natural law also allows for you to take action when violence is happening. And that's the sacred masculine principle of self-defense. That's the second of these pillars of enlightenment. So this is a very important part. And the reason why, if anyone out there is wondering about masculine and feminine, why are we attributing these principles according to gender? Well, it's not really like male and female in the modern day kind of sense of gender. It's more of like a negative and positive type of way, and not in the connotation of good and bad. It's negative and positive as in, think of an electrical charge. Negative being a grounding. Negative would be feminine, which is grounding, and positive would be masculine, which is energizing. The aspect of which will get you up and to take action. So that's what we're talking about when we say positive, negative, masculine, feminine, grounding, or initiating. So action or grounding. These are the pseudonyms. What would be the proper word? Homonyms for these, or synonyms. One of those weird yeah. Grammatical type of things. But I think that's a very important point to make, because people go, oh, gender. And it's like, no. It's about polarity here. It's about positive and negative. And that's where, it all wraps up into a nice little package with a neat little bow on top of it, just for you to digest, people out there listening. But the sacred masculine pillar of self-defense, this is a very important thing, to get back to the point that I was trying to make about this, because this is where we run into the most issues, in my opinion. Now, people out there might not understand violence and how to tell the difference between violence and something that you just feel uncomfortable with. And that is a very easy thing to explain to people and to get them to understand. But the real terrible truth of the world today is that the entire population in the aggregate, on average, has been defanged and doesn't know that we have the right to stand up and defend ourselves when faced with violence. So the obfuscation of violence is obviously terrible here. But then we talk about even when people see the violence happening, they don't know how to stand up and defend themselves against it. There's a certain element of people being timid that comes to mind, and being super submissive. So you mentioned the new age bullshit, and that is probably the biggest reason why people are ultra submissive and not knowing of the aspect of self-defense, because they don't teach that in the new age stuff. They'll teach the non-aggression principle until they're blue in the face, but they don't teach the self-defense principle because that's counterproductive to their entire satanic agenda.
Absolutely.
I'm kind of taking it away here, but I'm gonna.
Oh, you're good.
I'm gonna let you.
That's great.
Your take on all of that.
It's great to hear somebody else come in with some accuracy with the information. I think you nailed everything. One of the things about the New Age movement is that they confuse spirituality with passivity, right? So they think that all spirituality is just, meditation, just feeling good. It becomes very hedonistic, and it actually supercharges people's ego identification rather than actually empowering them and empowering both of their internal energies, the sacred masculine and sacred feminine. So I really like what you said about the masculine and the feminine and how they're correlated to polarity, and it's not necessarily gender, which takes us back to our physical gender, which takes us into the Hermetic principle of gender, right? And it's more of a mental or energetic form. And the metaphor that you use there, the analogy you use there, I actually have used many times, because I think one of the things that has happened along down our history is that we have this contextual confusion of semantics, and we have this issue with passion and symbolic literacy, where when we hear negative, we immediately think evil, we think darkness, we go into primal fears. And then what's that also associated with? It's associated with femininity, right? So then we start to suppress the feminine aspects of ourselves, right? The animus in our subconscious, and we completely demonize the sacred feminine principle. And this happens in men a lot, where we're taught in culture that, anything that happens to be feminine for a man to express is, no. And I mean, that's changing now with everything that's going on, obviously, with the social engineering programs that are going on. But it's still not an authentic form of expressing your divine, sacred feminine energy. And so I want to back just real quick to the sacred feminine, because that's like the foundation of the pillar. Walked about what we were just laying out there about the non-violent principle. It's the lowest part of the pillar, and then as you raise up the pillar, as you continue to build the pillar up and erect that pillar, you have more and more of those complexities of the psychological attributes that express themselves, that are built upon that principle, that are built upon the sacred and divine femininity in yourself, and it's one thing that a lot of people don't realize, that there's a lot more to it. There's a lot of compassion, empathy has to be built there. Some of that is interconnected with the foundation of that, but also there's other things that are built from that, like relationships, social relationships, intimate relationships, all kinds of stuff that goes on with that. But yeah, I think that it's a contextual issue, right? And that contextual issue ends up being semantical in a lot of people's minds. So the semantical issues are that they confuse these terms. These terms have been obfuscated so much that people confuse force and violence. And that's what I wanted to get to, is the confusion between self-defense, or the rightful use of force, compared to the wrongful use of force, which would be violence, right? So that's a big issue. And that leads us into the sacred masculine pillar of self-defense, obviously, that you were bringing up.
Everything okay? Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I kind of lost track of my train of thought there. I'm sorry. It's very unprofessional of me. But yes, the very, you're right. The very bottom of it, and it all builds off of itself in the long run, and it does. They intertwine, so like leading into the sacred feminine, leading into the sacred masculine. It's like the two constantly intertwine and play off of each other. and it's up to everybody to really kind of like find their own way. This is the subjective part about it. That I tend to have to come to grips with, is that it's up to everybody to find their own way and how to recognize their own ability to act according to these principles, you know, because they don't go away, no matter how much you want. Like they are eternal, you know, like you have the right to defend yourself, right? But you need to know when violence is happening to you in order to do so. But
No, I'm trying to fix my camera. It froze. Sorry about that.
Yeah, that was one of the things that made me kind of distracted there for a second.
Yeah.
I'm very sorry. It's very I find it very disrespectful of myself, but your camera froze. I was like, I hope everything's okay.
There we go. Yeah. And don't mind my dogs. They're three wild huskies in the living room back there. They're just gonna bark and play, you know. So they're wild.
It's perfectly fine. I'm not worried about it at all. So
yeah, I saw your cat there too. I like, that was a cute cat.
Yeah, he's cool, man.
Yeah.
He's
well, I was going to say, getting back on point here, the sacred masculine principle of self-defense is so crucial for people to understand. And like you said, people, they don't recognize, if they do recognize the violence taking place in their presence, they usually freeze. And it's like they're a deer in the headlights about to be hit by a car, you know, they just freeze up and they don't do anything. And it's because our parents and our culture has completely, you know, emasculated that part of us, completely diminished that part of us, where we don't know how to properly engage in physical, proper use of self-defense force when necessary. This is why I was so happy that my dad got me into martial arts at a young age. And, you know, most of us were into things like that at a young age anyways, but I actually went through training, you know, and it was an amazing thing, because it teaches these principles. Martial arts teaches you these principles, not so brazenly or directly, but that's what their concept is, you know. And just to, you know, clarify here, the sacred masculine pillar of self-defense is the what pillar is it? It's the Doric pillar on the Freemasonry first degree tracing board. So it would be on the left side. So like you talked about, it's the solar aspect. So it's the positive energy, right? So it's the activation of that energy. It's the expression into physical manifestation. So this principle is pretty much that any sentient being, this is like the oldest law in creation for any sentient being, that they have the right to defend their life, their property, whenever the wrongful use of force, which is violence, has been initiated against them. So if they're being coerced, if they're being restrained, if they're being stolen from, if their forms of violence is being conducted upon them, then they have the right to actually initiate physical force to whatever degree that's necessary. And that means up to killing somebody, to actually put them down and stop violence from taking place. So let's say I'm on the streets, right? And a thug comes up to me and he wants to steal my money, right? He wants to steal, and he has a gun. He points the gun at my head or my body. And he's like, give me your wallet. I want all your money. Well, most people there would probably just opt out and give them the wallet. And is that a right? Yes, it is. That is your right to do so. If you want to just give them your wallet, give the thug your wallet, that's your right to do so, right? But you also have the right to, let's say, physically restrain that person if you're capable. Or let's say I got a gun and I'm quicker to the draw. Well, you have the right to put him down in that situation. And some people would be like, oh, you are so attached to material that you actually would, you know, that you wouldn't just give over that property to that person when they're threatening you with violence. And it's like, no. They are so attached to material that they put my life in jeopardy, that they are the ones who are, you know, eagerly identified with that, the materialistic aspect, to that degree that they would actually put somebody else's life in jeopardy. And at that point, it's like, okay, you know, self-defense necessary. And, you know, like I said, you can walk away from it if you want to. That's fine. But I'm the one who's attached to the material. I'm protecting my life. You know, I'm protecting my well-being, because they're threatening my well-being, my life. It's not about the money, it's about my life. They just threaten my life for material, for a piece of paper. That's how much they are attached to that material, So I always get a kick out of people when they're like, oh, you should have just walked away or whatever. I'm like, no. You can't keep doing that, because what you do is you enable that activity. You're enabling that person to think that that's okay to continue to do that over and over and over, And what do? They go out and they rob from the next person. They rob from the old lady. They rob from the store, They go out and continue to initiate forms of violence onto people. So at some point, you got to put it down, And the key word there is necessary. The amount of force that's necessary to stop that violence. So I think a lot of people miss that point, right? A lot of people think, just kill them, just kill anybody who comes up and punches you in the face. And it's like, no. The amount of force that's necessary to stop violence from taking place, up to killing,
It's up to each individual to discern for themselves how much danger that they are in. That takes a great amount of responsibility, like get down to the green language of it, the responsibility. To be able to understand how much danger you are in, and to meet whatever force you are being, or whatever violence you are being met with, you meet that with an equal or greater than amount in return to kind of put a stop, to the very least, put a stop to it. And this is where the ego is necessary, where the survival mechanism of our brain is necessary and is a good thing. You don't want to live there, but it's a part of you that can never be taken away, at least not naturally. And it's going to be something that comes in handy. Now, Satanists, they want to keep you there. They want you to do nothing but live there. But we're talking about lifting yourself up to a point where you know when to access that part, when to access the survivalist, the self-preservation part of your being. And I don't want to advocate anyone to just go off and start offing people every time they feel like they're being mistreated. That's why I think it's important to kind of bring up the idea of equal, if not equal, force being met with violence, because defensive use of force, and then there's like a coercion, like the use of violence, and held under a state of duress. So these words, they're important to be able to use adequately, to use properly. Something that you said about the sacred masculine principle of self-defense. I was going over in the past couple months. I was actually, interested in learning more about your presentation material. So what I did was I went and I looked at your blog on One Great Work Network, and I saw your Fake Ass Punks presentation. And in there, you have a section about the epidysgenics agenda, about breeding out the rebels. And that has brought to mind about true masculinity. And nowadays they want to talk about it like it's toxic. They call it toxic masculinity, when men are just doing what men do, lifting heavy objects and putting stop to violent action. And that's like, how is that toxic if I'm just doing what I'm fucking biologically built to do? Excuse me. So I wanted to talk about that, where it's like, that is this epidysgenics agenda here, where they're just kind of shaming men for being men and doing what men do. And this isn't supposed to be taken in a misogynistic way or a patriarchal way. This is not the type of language that I'm using, or the type of attitude that I'm trying to give off. Me, James Cordiner, not trying to give off a misogynistic, patriarchal type of attitude. But we are men. We're supposed to do manly things. And part of that is defending those who cannot defend themselves or choose not to, and to defend ourselves. And it's not fucking toxic masculinity to do so. So stop it. If you're so it's like,
right.
It's kind of come across my, it's been on my mind lately, and it's part of the research that I'm doing. So about breeding out the rebel, breeding out masculinity, and making it so we kind of have to expose this for what it is, that submissive traits in men are being brought up and put forward as the good thing, that this is what a good man is, one that is timid and meek and doesn't stand up for thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. So yeah, I mean, up to and including killing. So why did you use that language? Why did you use the word kill?
Well, we have to distinguish the difference between murder and killing. And yeah, I wanted to kind of clarify that as well. I'm not advocating for people to just go start off every thug or every, person who's committing acts of violence. I'm just letting you know that you need to have that in your mind, that you need to have that kind of resolve, that that it may come down to that. And if you don't exercise those in your mind, then you don't exercise them in the physical, because it always starts in the mind. And if you do that, then you're putting yourself, your family, the people that you love at jeopardy, because then you're not willing to do what may be necessary in certain situations. And we always know that some of the greatest defenders of freedom, of family, of love have been people who are willing to do what most people will not do. And that's kind of what we're doing here today. But to talk about the toxic masculinity and breeding out the rebel as well. There's toxic behaviors, right? There's toxic behaviors. Those are not masculinity. Those are not masculine in nature. They can be feminine as well. So it's not you applying that term masculine or feminine behind toxicity or toxic. It implies that the essence of masculinity, or the essence, the totality of femininity, is actually toxic. If you say, yeah, that guy over there is doing immoral behaviors because he's stealing, or he's, accosting people of force or something like this, then he's a bad dude. He's an immoral individual, and he needs to be dealt with. Or a female, those solely masculine traits. But like you said, they're putting that out there as a social engineering program, and it comes from these huge think tank institutions that have been around for so long, like the Tavistock Institution. If you read into the Tavistock Institution, they have been putting this stuff out there for so long about trying to divide the sexes, right? They want to divide the sexes because not only does that divide us energetically, but it also divides us physically. And it's the only device that we have that is 50 each side, male and female. So they want to make sure that is all polluted and all distorted and mixed up with each other as much as possible. I told a female friend of mine this the other day. I said, look, females were put here to do exactly what men cannot do, and men were put here to do exactly what females cannot do. And we need to accept those purposes and those traits and bring them to the table, and we unify, and it makes us stronger as a society when we do that. The old idea that every strong male has a strong female behind them, and this goes back into thelema. It goes back into agape. It goes into the idea that love is under will, that the sacred feminine aspect, the heart-based care, is underneath the action. It's underneath the wisdom, the manifestation of that positive influence in society, that positive manifestation. So, and that's why we started out with the female pillar, because that's the foundation. It's love under will. Love must come first. So it's the heart-based consciousness, So you got to have the heart, you got to get your mind in order, and then you got to have the guts to put it out there into the world. And like you're talking about, the epidemics agenda is running rampant to either assimilate rebels. They either want to assimilate all the rebels into their political narrative, so that they take all that energy and put it into a political, groupthink agenda, such as, let's say, the ridiculous January 6th thing, like that's a great thing. Like, you got this energy going on. It's not authentic rebellion, it's absolute, it's a sham, it's not real rebellion. but they're taking that masculine energy and they're pushing it into directions that fuels the political control agenda, fuels the New World Order. It fuels the dark occultists and their entire, control scheme that they're trying to put out there. So we have to discern what a rebel actually is and what it means to be authentic in rebelling against the iniquities and inequities of the world, right? We have to discern what that actually means. And to me, what it means is living in harmony to truth and objective morality, and then applying that into reality. You have to apply it. You can't just have it in your head. You got to put it forward in some way or another. And that's also a form of self-defense. What we're doing right now, James, form of self-defense. This is mental and emotional self-defense, and it's a little bit of physical self-defense. Physical force. This takes a lot of work to get done. Putting on a podcast is not easy. Being strategic, having the skill sets to be able to publish this stuff, getting a network going. There's all kinds of things that go in with getting a podcast going that you have to physically enact, and that's a form of self-defense. It's a form of fighting against the overwhelming, massive amounts of information that are based on lies and deceit that are, not only over the internet, but also in our own everyday life, in our own social lives, with the subliminal influencing, the subliminal use of symbolism, the mass media manipulation. So they do everything they can. And I get so, I get agitated at a lot of people, because I still know people that watch the news every single day, constantly, every single day. And I'm not saying don't keep up with current affairs. You should keep up with current affairs to the best of your ability. You need to know what's going on in the world, but you better have the right mindset to discern what's going on that hypnosis box, and hypnosis means putting the knowledge, suppressing the knowledge. Hypno means underneath, and gnosis is knowledge. So you're putting knowledge down, you're suppressing it. So, and that's what it's all about, making sure there's a power differential between people who have knowledge and people who do not, right? So you don't want people like us to be out there talking about this stuff. So we're called terrorists, we're called agents of chaos, we're called, any name that they can have, any group association that they can put us in to demonize us, right? They'll call us cult members, right? So I tell people, okay, if I'm in a cult, it's a cult of freedom, and it's a cult of liberty, it's a cult of truth. I'll wear that as a badge of honor. It's better than being in a cult that will go and initiate violence onto somebody else, So, and a true cult is a cult that will actually harm other people because they don't believe in their tenets or their creed or, their belief systems, their dogmatic belief systems. So they'll try to force you into that. But yeah, it all comes down to unifying with the alchemical marriage of the sacred masculine and sacred feminine principles within us. And if you don't have this equilibrium, right? If you don't have this, then you don't have true intelligence. And that gets us to the middle pillar, the third pillar of Freemasonry, which is called the ionic pillar. And that pillar, it has some green language in it. Ion, which is a charged particle. So you're charged, you're activated, but it's also the I being on, so you can see the cult mysteries, you see what's taking place in the world. And it's the middle pillar. So this is true intelligence. So you have sacred masculine, which is the intella, which is intellect. Then you have the sacred feminine, which is gens, and that's generative principle. And then you have the middle pillar, which bridges all those, which is the I in the middle. So you have true intelligence when you can combine both the masculine intellect and the feminine generative principle of care, and then you put it into the world, you put it out there. And another way you can look at it is from the 13th degree in Freemasonry as well, which is the royal arch. So the arch in that tracing board becomes that bridging point. So we bridge both of those like an arc, like a spark from one to the other, So then you got the keystone in the middle that represents the foundation of the structure, because without the keystone, then the structure, the arch will fall, it will collapse. So that's the keystone, and it's the heart, it's based in the heart, So there's a lot to it, you know, and I'm not saying that I'm not advocating for the lodge system of Freemasonry either. I'm talking about esoteric, symbolic essence of the tradition of Freemasonry beyond the lodge system. You know, I'm talking about the underlying metaphorical and allegorical knowledge that's stored within the symbolism that predates all the lodge systems, and it goes back to ancient Egypt, and it goes all around the world. In Kabbalah, we have these pillars in the Kabbalistic tradition. You know, the pillar of mercy and the pillar of serenity, I believe it is, or the pillar of judgment. I think that's what it is. Yeah, it's the pillar of mercy and the pillar of judgment. You know, and it's just amazing how you can synchronize all this information. You'll find it everywhere. Going back to what I said about martial arts, I learned these things in martial arts. You know, I learned, like, whenever I'm being accosted with violence, that I have to make sure to be able to put this person down and make sure that they're not going to continue to harm me, you know. And that's part of that sacred masculine aspect. And we don't have enough of that. We need more people to be activated. But unfortunately, like you pointed out very wisely, is that people can't distinguish how much force to use. And they get these lines blurred between, like, so we have to be very careful because, like you said, we need clarity with the ambiguity there. And that's where skills, that's where discernment, that's where training comes into it. You have to do your shadow work. You got to think through all these things. You got to really, you know, put these things into effect and imagine how these scenarios we can do about that, what options you have. People don't use the trivium is what it comes down to.
That's
you know?
right.
And that's what we need. We need more people using the trivium methodology. And the three pillars part of the three pathways. That's what trivium means. Tri means three, and then via means way of or path. So the trivium is the way of the three, the pathway of three. So, and that's grammar, logic, and rhetoric. Get your grammar in order, process it, you know, get your logic, logically process all that, and then put it out into the world through rhetoric, you know, the output. So, I mean, this all synchronizes, and that's how truth works, right? It all comes together. It fits together as a tapestry. You're not fitting together, then you need to figure out why it's not fitting there and see if it's your orientation of how you're looking at it, or, you know, is it just a lie? Is it just unuseful? Is it dogma? Right?
Yeah. Or are you missing a few pieces of the puzzle, and then run it through the trivium method until you find the missing pieces? You know,
absolutely,
because that's what you do with information. So a few things that you said that I've got jotted down here about the middle pillar, and about the what you said about Freemasonry. So it's more about just seeing the esoteric correspondences between different traditions, right? And that's a big important aspect to really be able to do, is to draw the lines and to see the correspondences. That is a part of the trivium method. So the threefold path to knowledge. And what we're trying to do here for people is like so I hear Will say, Will Keller has it got it nailed down. So simplify the profane, to help people understand. So the idea is to intellectually arm you so you can defend yourself. Like what you said, what we're doing here, this is action. This is a form of self-defense. It's called intellectual self-defense. And that's the first battlefield. It really is. The battlefield of the mind. It's a battlefield. As much as I dislike Alex Jones, that motherfucker, he got the perfect name for a show, Information War. It really is. It's an information war. If they can get into your head, they can fucking convince you to do anything. This is a problem that I have with the public school system, is they're creating a bunch of mindless dupes to go out there and fill all these boxes that they create. You know, it's a you know, how free are you if all you're so you're free to move about in this room. That's the world we live in, folks. We are free to move around in this room. I don't want to be in that room. I want to be able to roam free, fully unbridled freedom. That's what I want. And this is how we get there. It starts by being able to intellectually defend yourself, using words properly, knowing when you're being lied to, knowing how to find the truth. Brandon brought it up perfectly. Thank you for bringing that up tonight on the show, because that's a very important part that people fail to understand is how to find the truth, how to know when you're being lied to. There's a method. It's called the trivium. It's a threefold path to knowledge, to being able to unpack information and being able to see what sticks, drawing logical conclusions, and finding the truth to any topic that you choose. You just need to gather as much information about the topic. Then you weed out inconsistencies. And whatever's left over, well, that could be the truth. The work might not be done yet, but that's the part about weeding out the inconsistencies and getting rid of the redundancies of the information. And whatever's left over, that's the truth of the matter. It's a big part of it, man, because that has to do with when you're supposed to respond with defensive force, knowing the truth about a violation of your rights. So that is when you're going to have to respond with a defensive force. You know, and so the middle pillar there, that was so I teased it in the description for the show. That's the hidden pillar there, is that middle one. You know, it's the part where they work together, right? Am I understanding that correctly, Brandon?
Yeah, I call it the pillar of equilibrium. That's what I called it in my Fake Ass Punks presentation. And yeah, it's the unifying pillar, right? It's the unifying ourselves. So like, if you think about it in the Kundalini way, you have serpents that coil around the shaft, you know, and that center shaft, that channel, it's the direct channel where the two serpents are the sacred masculine and sacred feminine. And that middle represents the stability of those two. It represents the solidarity of the relationship between those two. And we see this all over the place. So whenever we fall into an imbalance, right, whether it's a chronic right left brain, let's say like the new age community, they'll fall into the chronic right brain imbalance of passivity, you know, being passive, completely passive. And from there, defense, if you fall into the complete left brain imbalance, you're going to fall into, you know, complete dominance and aggression, and you'll go into things like, you know, solipsism's on both sides of the chronic imbalance. You can be solipsistic on the right side or solipsistic on the left. So order following, right? Order following happens to be a very receptive place, meaning that you take an order and then you go and do it. So it's a right brain imbalance, but when they go out into the world and commit the order, it's a left brain imbalance. So we have to understand how these things kind of mix up a little bit. So you might have a primary brain imbalance, being I'm primarily right brain because I'm a hedonist, right? Because I just want to seek out pleasure in my life. That's the whole purpose of life, is pleasure. And that would be a primary brain imbalance. Whereas a primary left brain imbalance could be like a scientist, you know, just linear thinking, just logic, you know, no emotions, no care, no creativity, you know, just strict, rigid skepticism as well, you know, no open-mindedness, right? So these things tend to play off of each other, and the ruling class, the dark occult, they know this, and all they need is to get a few people like this, and it spreads wildfire, because everybody starts to infect everybody else in the group. You know, this is the thing I always try to tell people too, because groups are easier to control than an individual, you know. So it's much easier to control the group just by injecting certain types of ideas into the group through certain applications, maybe a spokesman or something like that. And then the group takes off with it. But an individual, as a sovereign, you know, an internal monarch, a person who knows himself, who's self-actualized, you're not going to control that person. You know, he's not going to fall for groupthink. So the dark occult don't target individual people for the most part. They target groups of people. They target groups of group consciousness, and that's how they sway the tides in the politics. So we see this with the right and the left divide, which is ultimately an illusion. It's a Hegelian dialectical illusion where it leads you into the same doorway, the same slaughterhouse, right? And they play off of these. So if you happen to be right more, you're going to have that right imbalance, right? Or that left, you're in that left imbalance at some level. And they reverse it too. So sometimes if you're on the left, you might be in the right. If you're on the right, you might be in the left. So it's just, you got to stay oriented. And that's where things can get complex. That's why I like what you just talked about, taking and simplifying it, right? So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to simplify all this stuff, but we do also have to recognize that we're going to come up against scholars. We're going to come up against, and they're going to try to shred us, They're going through every theological, philosophical debate. It's not real philosophy, but that they can pick apart every little nuance that we may have overlooked or something like this, and then they'll say, well, then there you go, your whole argument is shattered then because of the one little thing. It's called the fallacy. Let's say, for example, let's say I made a fallacy in my, let's say I spoke a fallacy in an argument or something like that. Well, then the other person in the debate, they would say, oh, that's a fallacy. You used the fallacy, so your entire premise is completely destroyed. And it's like, no. It's called the fallacy, meaning that you can't just use that. It doesn't dismantle anything that actually was true. It just means I messed up there, and I see that a lot. We see this when it comes to words a lot. A lot of people say using the original definitions of the words is called an etymological fallacy. And I'll be talking about that in my upcoming presentation, but it's complete bullshit, because what it does is it makes you disconnect from the evolution of words and how they evolved and how they were used and their true clarity, right? Because all of our words are a compound of other words from languages, usually a lot Latin, a lot of it's Latin based, and from that, you get to understand the true clarity of these words. So that's why we end up breaking down words in their original sense, because they make a lot more sense than the words that have been controlled and manipulated and obfuscated, like the word anarchy or the government, to that high degree that people don't understand what they actually mean. And when you break them down, you find out, oh, well, this actually aligns with reality. It actually, this seems way, way more based in truth than what I was taught in school about this, or what I hear colloquially about this. So it's thing, but we do have to understand that, this all comes back to the function of the brain, right? It all comes back to how your brain works. And if your brain is working really, you need those electrical chemical activity, you need the synapses working, you need the neurons firing, you need everything going the correct way. And that's what a lot of people don't have. They have a chronic left brain or chronic right brain imbalance, which leads them into being easily controlled because they've never worked on their own psychology. They've never worked on themselves. And that's why we need true self-respect. So like the community that I came from tends to be really right-brained, like the punk community. They get into nihilism, they get into hedonism, they get into just do whatever you want, and they think they're actually rebelling, which wraps us back around to what true rebellion is. You got to realize that hedonism is a tool used by the ruling class to make sure that you stay docile, to make sure that you don't self-activate, so you don't get out in the world. I'm not saying don't have fun. I'm not saying that pleasure is a bad thing. I'm saying the chronic abuse of that, thinking that that's the sole purpose of your existence to be here. That freedom really doesn't matter. It's secondary to my sole pleasure of, just getting off every day and drinking every single day myself into a coma, right? Or smoking myself.
Yeah, that's satanic, that kind of mindset.
Absolutely. It's completely. Oh no, you're fine. I like the rapport that we have going on here. So yeah, and that's one of the biggest issues that I see in that community, is that all they really care about is themselves. Like you said, it's satanic. It's the first tenet of Satanism, which is selfishness, me above anything else. And then what they want is just freedom for themselves. They don't really care if they're just like, freedom for me, that's it, just me. And you see them buying into a lot of the leftist ideas with, Antifa and all this stuff, and the fake ass punk community and fake ass anarchist community, obviously, is what I was trying to say there. These all tie into these basic concepts, these basic philosophical concepts. And we need to strengthen our argumentation because, like I said, we're going to run into scholars, we're going to run into religious zealots that are theologists, and we have to be able to tell them, these simplified principles, and for them to understand them.
Yeah, that's a strong point to hit on, and I know that Douglas has really tried to instill into people the importance of speaking and presenting this information in a scholarly manner. That if we desire to be taken seriously and to be heard, then we're going, like you're saying, we're going to come up against what our opposition can provide as their intellectual people to go to bat for them and the things that they want. So we have to be able to step up to the plate and fight that kind of fire with a fire of our own. And that takes serious dedication to being able to present this material in a manner in which isn't offensive, in a manner in which that can be taken seriously. I like to speak with parrhesia, I like to cuss, but there comes a time when that kind of righteous indignation has to come out, and there's no better way to say it than I need to fucking say it this way, and you're gonna fucking listen to me. But
Right.
we also have to be able to dial that back and to be able to speak to people in a language that isn't going to turn them away, because that isn't going to give off the impression that we are just some potty mouthed little know nothing that's
Right.
just a crybaby, like you're talking about the fake ass rebels on the January 6th. Those weren't rebels, like you said. Those were crybabies that didn't get their way. They didn't get their slave master, so they got to go and do what they did, And that's not an insurrection. That's not a
No,
rebellion. That's
no,
a
not at
bunch
all.
of wet diapered little babies that didn't get their fucking pudding. And it's really what it comes down to. And here I am talking about speaking in a certain way, and
Right, right.
this is we're just a couple of guys, having a good time tonight. But I wanted to make sure that we brought that up. And yeah, it's interesting that you talked about etymology of words and trying to stray away from the modern dictionary, because guess what, folks out there, Merriam-Webster dictionary is bought and paid for by the Council on Foreign Relations. This is a roundtable group, much like the Trilateral Commission, much like the Tavistock Institute for Ideas. The Council on Foreign Relations is literally set up to make sure that there are ideas being implanted into your brains, prescribed belief systems being handed down from on high to make sure that you are operating as the slave that they intended to make you to be. So we have to understand that these institutions, such as dictionaries, school systems, these things are bought and paid for. They're in these perceived slave master or controllers. They're in their back pockets. So it is important that we do go and get ourselves like etymology dictionaries, or even the Oxford English Dictionary. Maybe try to find older versions of them if you can, and take it seriously, because the definition of anarchy is very inaccurate in most, if not all, modern day dictionaries, and a lot of words are very inaccurate. So this is how they get to manipulate reality, is by obfuscating words. And I'd like to remind people of that as we're going forward with just kind of trying to educate ourselves, because education is just, well, we look at, I might have some of this incorrect, and I'm willing to take the hit, but education is just basically leading someone to the truth, leading out of darkness. The word educate, I believe, etymologically means to lead out of darkness. Are you familiar with the etymological definition of the word education? Or
Yeah, that's correct. That is what it means.
Okay.
as far as what I know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Nailed it. Swish.
Yeah.
But anyways, yeah, I just wanted to give a shout out to Douglas there because it like hearing him say that inspired me to step up my game. And
Mhm.
I still cuss, and that's fine. It's good to speak with a loose tongue and to be able to show emotion, but you also have to be able to, really show them what you got, and show them how it's done. And
Right.
I'm not all the way there yet, but I'm on my way. You better believe it.
None of
And
us
so,
are. None of us are so perfect that we haven't, that we don't need to work on ourselves at some level.
but that's why we have a network. That's why we
That's
have
right.
a network, so we can lift each other up and be there for one another. When one of our brothers is falling, we can help them out and carry them for a while until they're ready to carry themselves the rest of the way. And that's why it's important. And I want to tell people out there that are creating content and everything, if you're feeling burnt out, step away, because there's us that are here to carry the torch while you're gone. And when you're ready to come back, we'll be here. We'll like you never left. Something else that you talked about was the holistic understanding of the self. I believe that is very important to be able to understand the kind of chemical wedding that goes on in the brain. You've been talking about left brain and right brain, and how if you're chronically dominant in one half, then the other half is lacking, of course, because you're chronically dominant in one half, you're going to be lacking in the other. But what we need to be able to do is find a balance there. So there's a word for that, and it's escaping me. It was just on the tip of my tongue, but it's it was just on the tip of my tongue. But it is, man, I had it. I really want to
look it up. Yeah.
I have a slide with it on it, for Christ's sake.
Right.
I really wanted to get this right. Let's see here. It is called hemisync. We want to have hemisync.
Right. Yeah, the
So
hemisphere syncing. Yep.
Exactly. So we have, that is what we want to be able to do. Do you have any advice on how people can kind of get there? Because it's something that I think would be pertinent to this conversation. What do you think?
Yeah. I think it's very pertinent. I would say, first of all, look at your strengths, look at what you normally do every single day. Is it a masculine? Is it a left brain attribute? Are you very scientific? Are you very, linear thinking? Are you less compassionate? Then look at the opposite, right? See where your weaknesses are from that. Say, okay, I'm not very empathetic. I'm not very compassionate. I don't feel a lot of emotions. I've, put myself in this condition where I'm not expressing my whole self. I'm not expressing my anima. I'm not expressing my sacred feminine principle. So from there, then you start to work on those things, just like you would work on anything else. Just like you'd work on any weakness. If you're a skinny guy and you got to work on muscles, you find out your weaknesses and then you work through that. You work on those muscle groups and you try to, strengthen those areas. So I would say just find those weaknesses, but you got to know what they are, and the way that you can know what they are is by knowing what the opposite is. So you got to know who you are at this moment, and you can't lie to yourself. You have to be honest to yourself about this, right? You have to say to yourself, who am I really? And look in the mirror and be honest about it, and then start to say, who do I want to be? Who do I need to be? It's not even just want to be, because want can be very subjective. Who do I need to be a good person, to be a better person, to activate my entire self, to fulfill my potential here, to be able to do the things that I need to do and to get the things that I say I want in reality. And usually it's through working. Obviously, it's always through working on those weaknesses. So like for me, for a time period, I was very right brain. So I had to work on my scholarly skills. I had to work on my reading. I had to work on, getting in tune with my masculine aspects, becoming less fearful of speaking in public, getting out, not being an introvert, starting to be more of a mitrovert is what I call it, activating both sides of that, extrovert and introvert at the same time, and having that alchemical union between those two principles within us. So, like if you fall into a right brain modality of thinking, if you're all in the feminine, then you're going to be enslaved think is what it's called. You're going to be completely submissive to authoritative figures and authoritative ideas. And if you fall into the left brain attribute, into chronic left brain imbalance, then you're going to be a master thinker. You're going to think that you can legitimately dominate other people. And that's how this dynamic works. It's just like an abusive relationship. It's the abusive relationship we have with ourselves. It's the abusive relationship we have with other people in our families and our friends and our circles, abusive relationship that we have in society, and abusive relationship with government. Obviously, it's the same thing. It's just multiplied, So I think it's really important that people try to, write it down. Also, write everything down. Write down what you want to do, and then start to make a checklist and start to go out and do that stuff. If you want to become a content creator, learn the skills that you have to be a content creator, and don't worry about being perfect with it. You start out at the level that you need to start out at, and then you work your way up. You work your way through that. Nobody is perfect. I'm not perfect with it. You're not perfect with it. Mark Passio is not perfect with it. Douglas Martin's not perfect with it. We all make mistakes here and there. We might misspeak here and there. We might mistype something. There might be a typo, maybe multiple typos. Things like that happen, but you just got to put it out there. You just got to continue to do that and persevere, and then you'll get better at it, just like any other skill. But people are scared. So you have to face your fear. You got to get out of the fear-based consciousness, and you got to love yourself to do that. You have to truly love yourself enough to say, I want to be better. I want to change my behaviors. I want to be a good person. You are mutable. You can change. You're malleable. You can change yourself. So let's say you were a bad person at one time. Well, the good thing is that you can change it. You can change all that. You can work on yourself and become a good person. You're not predetermined to be that bad person your entire life. So work on it. If you have a conscience and you realize that you're doing bad things, stop doing the bad things. Maybe seek forgiveness, forgive yourself, apologize to yourself, apologize to others. So you just gotta continue to work with yourself, work on your shadow self, understand the dark psychology that you have going on within yourself. Triune is a big aspect. So
yeah, during that self-auditing that people might have to go and do, honestly, guys out there, anyone out there listening, and they're like, wow, I'm going to go and try to do that. You might come to the conclusion that a lot of the things that you found within yourself, like the things that made you maybe have the self-loathing tendencies, or the all of these ideas, they weren't originally yours. They were put there. And this is how this fake control structure, it's very real, but it's not legitimate. This is how they get you, is by implanting these ideas to get you into this self-loathing behavior. When you're going down the path of self-auditing, I want to tell people out there how rough it can really be, because you're literally, you're going to be going against your own self. There's a part of yourself, and we talked about it earlier tonight, about how the ego can be good, but this is how the ego can be bad, because it's going to trick you into thinking that there's nothing wrong with you, when there could be. When you're not loving yourself, you're not really able to give that out to anyone else. And that's a problem, because if you have a family and you have this fake care, when you're really only looking at people for what they can give you, you're absolutely just stuck in the me first mentality of Satanism. And, that needs to be broken. It really does. And this is where you're battling against your own ego, that part of you that wants to preserve, where it can be a good thing. Self-preservation in some forms is a good thing when you're coming up against, when you're the flight or fight response. You're going to stand there and fight. Well, one of the ways of self-defense is also to run away. But when your self-preservation is there to the point where like you're protecting, your self-preservation is protecting bad behavior, that's when it becomes a problem. So that's what they want you to do. They want you to be able, the big the control structure, who's they? Oh, well, it's the dark fucking occultists that run the world straight up. And they want you to be self-loathing. They want you to hate yourself. And we don't want that. I don't want people to hate themselves. I think that's a terrible place to be. I've been there.
Yeah, me too.
It's a very terrible place to be. It almost seems endless. It's like it's some sort of divine intervention. I mentioned it a couple weeks, I think last week, about divine intervention. It can be synchronicity, nature's wink, however you want to call it. There's moments in everybody's life where, I said it last week, I'll say it again this week. There's moments in everybody's life where nature, where God, however, the source of creation, however you want to refer to it, is cool with me. But there's times in everybody's life where that energy gives you an opportunity to change. It comes in and it's giving you an opportunity to change. And I want to inspire people to be able to recognize that. And this is what Brandon and I have been talking about all night, is how certain principles can be applied to grow the self within, and to be able to shine that light back out into the world, and to make it so that other people can see that light as well. And I really just want to inspire people to be able to see those winks, to be able to see that divine intervention, to be able to change. Because it's not going to happen, and we're not going to see a great change in the world until each individual starts changing their own behaviors and getting real with your shortcomings. I mean, it's okay to have them, but like, get real with them, and that's when it's like, there's no shame in asking for help if you're having a shortcoming. That's why I wanted to make sure that I mentioned, like, if you're a content creator or if you're doing the great work or whatever, I mean, it's constant, it's a constant effort to do the great work. And it's a very, that's why it's called the great work, not the mediocre work. It's so it's like, it's very, very tiresome. And it takes a very strong constitution in there of the self, inner constitution of each individual to do. But it's about being able to give yourself a break. Something that you were saying, Brandon, is be able to give yourself a break on some of the things that you meet within yourself and that you might not like at first. You gotta get real. Stop lying. Stop lying to yourself. And it's about healing yourself. That's right. And to be able to heal yourself is the first step in being able to heal the world.
That's right.
And I don't know. I hope everything that I'm doing is at least helping some people do that. Like, yeah, I had to do it myself. And then when I did it, I was like, God, I can't, man, I'm seeing all this crazy, wacky shit going on in the world. I can't just keep quiet about it. If I understand some of this stuff, I got to share my understanding with the rest of the world, and see if there's others out there that can help.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I've taken multiple breaks. I just recently got off a hiatus, from doing the work. And it was really nice because then all of a sudden I saw people like you popping up, and I was like, oh, this is great. And it was just like what you were, I know. But it was just like what you were explaining, your brothers in arms, or your brothers in your community, your sisters, your brothers, your family, whoever it might be. It doesn't have to be blood family, friends, they will help to carry that torch. They will help to carry you. They will help to carry that torch. So it was so great because when I first started doing this, I was looking around. It was like being in a desert, it was like it was a desert and there was nobody there. And then, every once in a while I'd get a glimpse of something, and it was like, oh, maybe that's somebody who's on the same level as me. If they're on the level, like I can see them. So I walk over there and then I realize it's just a mirage, and it's like, oh, what the hell? It's like, what the fuck, man? But now I'm like looking around, it's like a little oasis. I'm like, oh, wow, and it's still not enough. I'm not saying we got enough. We need numbers on our side, but this is how we get through to people, and we have to be strategic in it. And most people, like you're talking about, are stuck in some type of self-loathing, apathy, depression, many different psychological issues. It's not going to be perfect. You're not just going to magically not be depressed out of nowhere, just, magically. You got to work on that, and it might come back up. It's something you have to exercise. You have to exercise self-care, so don't beat yourself down because it comes back up. Just know that you have the skills now to deal with that if you rest in yourself, and you can actually mitigate those emotions as they come up, and you can start to work through those things. Over time, it's going to diminish. It's going to get weaker and weaker and weaker. And one way of doing that is by having true self-respect. You have to really gain true self-respect. And I mean, I went through endless nights of great depression, just staring at the dark ceiling, just, wanting to kill myself, just all kinds of great aspects of depression, and just horrible. I don't mean great in a positive sense. I just mean massive, just horrible suffering I went through. And then through that process, I finally said, man, I got to change, like I'm going to go down such a dark path. And most people, like, they either get right to the edge of that or not. They get to there and then they don't act on it. Then they go, if they do act on it, they go to pharmaceuticals, right? They go to some sort of psychiatric treatment, right? Rather than the knowledge of the esoteric ways of dealing with your psychology, or the knowledge of nature, being able to heal yourself and getting plant remedies, if possible, to help with those things. Look into alternative methods first before you go down the control system. Obviously, I would say don't even go down it. You're probably better off in that state of depression than you are going down the state of using these pharmaceuticals to actually mitigate these issues. I'm not saying that's an absolute, but that's my opinion on that. I think most people would be better off just dealing with the depression on their own, and I know that's probably kind of cold, but I mean, I don't want to see people go through the type of brain damage and the brain imbalances that go on because of those types of pharmaceuticals. And we know who runs the pharmaceutical companies. We know that it's intentionally being done to, like you said earlier, breed out rebellion, to make people docile, to cause brain damage, And why is that? Because it makes very, very good slaves, very productive slaves, if you can get just the right dose for people. Just make them into drones, make them into mindless workers for the system. And that's what our education system does. Our entire education system was set up to just pump out workers. That's all it was set up for. It's not really there to educate people. It was just set up to make you a worker.
The Prussian education model coming out of Germany is literally what happened is that the Germany used to be called Prussia, and when they came up against in the Napoleonic Wars, Napoleon Bonaparte, his crusade all over Europe, he came across these farmers with pitchforks, and he had a well-trained army against an army of just basic people. And the Prussians were like, we can't keep these guys on the battlefield. They're just running away. What do we do? And they set up this education model where, like, they would just pump out people that would either go into working into factories or they'd be going into the military. And how do you do that? You make them docile, order following little slaves. You teach them what to think and not how to think. And That's right. Adopted that method in this country like 200 years ago.
Yep, that's right.
And it's disgusting, quite frankly. People want more information about that. They can go and look into Murray Rothbard's work. He did a fantastic book called now it's escaping me, but go and find it. It's Education by Coercion. It's something along those lines. I actually did a small reading of that on the air a couple years ago. So it's a fantastic read, and it's a nice, well-rounded view on how the education system in America came to be. Yeah, and I really liked what you said about care, because that's where it really all starts. You gotta care. You gotta actually care, and about the whole uh, pharmaceutical point that you made. It's a topic of much contention, and it's very, very difficult for people to hear what you just said, and to not just be like, this guy, fucking, what does he know? You know what I mean? Like, of course, I'm
Right.
going to go take the pills. Listen to this guy telling me not to take the pills. What does he know? Well, the
Yeah.
idea is that um, we're trying to get back to nature here.
Yeah.
We're trying to get back to that, and there are natural remedies out there for the ailment that people are feeling. And one of the things I guess I would like to point out is how the support structure is so important, and if you can't find the support structure from people, right, if you can't find it within the people that are initially responsible for providing such a thing, which is your family, if they've abandoned you on that, you have every right to go and find your own tribe. There are people out there that want what's best for you, and they are not the government. They're not the pharmaceutical industry. They're actual people that know how to, help. I think that there are a few cases where maybe some pharmaceutical intervention is completely necessary. And so I really don't want to tell people that there's never a time or place, but I do want to remind people of the addictive nature of a lot of these drugs, and how a lot of the drugs are actually not really helping you. They're just creating another problem to get you on another drug to hook you for life. And a lot of your issues that are causing such depression, it might even be caused, the cause of it might be that you are living in an unnatural setting. And all you really need to do, and over time, you have to consistently do this work, is just kind of get back to nature yourself. Go out in the fucking woods, get some peace and quiet, put down your phone, get off the computer, maybe find a new job. This is about the sacrifice, the sacrifice aspect of taking your health into your own hands. You got to sacrifice some things. Go and do it. Is your life really worth it? You got to ask yourself that question, people. Is your life really worth it? And I think that most people will come out the other end of that question with a firm no. And I hope that they do. Otherwise, what are we really doing?
Yeah.
But you have an upcoming presentation. Let's talk about that, man. That's why earlier in the evening I brought up the funnel conference. It was a good way to bring you in and into the show, and to kind of get people interested in what you've got coming up and what's in the future for Brandon Martin. What is your presentation going to be about?
It's actually going to be on green language, and it's going to be covering synchronicity, synchromysticism, philology, which is like the study and the evolution of literature and language, and phonetics and symbolism and things along this nature. It's going to be a condensed version that I hope to expand upon on the Cubbyhole podcast in the future. And it's going to be a really good presentation for anybody who's interested in the occult knowledge and the esoteric knowledge of the secret synchronistic ways that we find meaning in words beyond their intentional meanings that are applied to them through phonetics and lots of different aspects that apply to this. So I'm really excited. I don't want to spoil anything with it, obviously, because I've been working on it pretty hard. And I know that Nathan, the main host of the Cubbyhole podcast that I co-host sometimes, he just did a really great episode on green language, which is going to complement my entire presentation. I'm going to get into a lot of historical facts with it. Excuse me. And I'm going to show exactly, all these connections that a lot of people don't know about. So you can't find a lot of information on green language. Usually it's just kind of spoken about in the occult groups and the esoteric groups a little bit here and there. And you'll hear people talk about it as the language of the birds or twilight language or the language of light and things like this. But nobody's really like laid down a conclusive, example or explanation of what it is, how it works, how you can use it in your own life, how to make it practical, how to bring the pragmatism into it. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm going to try to show how it's based upon more of a science than what a lot of people would think. And it's not just wordplay, it's not just you're just having fun with words and you can just make it up as you go, that there actually is a scientific way that you can break down these words and look into it and find a deeper meaning that helps to expand your consciousness and helps to progress your goal in your life and helps the all in the holistic sense, and why that is taking place as well. So it's a really big topic and I'm going to do the best I can to cover everything in there, but I think everybody's really going to enjoy it. I've been enjoying putting it together. I know that. So
I'm excited for it. I can tell you, I listen to your content and like, it's always, and a lot of us do it, we do choose certain words to like constantly break down and remind people, it doesn't just mean what you think it means. There's other angles, other ways to look at this and look at this language. The English language is really, from what I've heard, like the hardest language to learn as a second language, and it's a fascinating language, dude. I can't wait for your presentation about that, man. So you mentioned the Cubbyhole podcast, and we're winding down here. So I want to make sure that we can tell people where to find all of your stuff. And but before we do, is there any other like hard-hitting information about the topic that we chose to cover tonight that you absolutely wanted to make sure we got in there? If we've left anything out, please, by all means, let's make sure we don't leave any really important stuff out.
Well, I mean, you could cover this topic for, probably 50, 100 episodes, obviously, and still not get through to everything, especially if you really get into the esoteric knowledge of it. That's kind of why I brought up Freemasonry earlier and the Kabbalistic tradition, because if you start to connect these things into the ancient mystery schools and the ancient schools of thought, then you'll really start to pull out and especially study polarity, study mythology with polarity. You'll find out that one of the most ancient mythological motifs for this will be like the dragon or serpent myth. And you'll find out that it represented certain time periods in the seasons, such as drought or luscious rainfall. And so, the dragon is a really interesting symbol. I'll just add this in there. It's not really quite as relevant as what I was just speaking on, but it actually has all the 5 elements in it, right? Because you got the scales, which is the water, you got the wings, which is the air, you got the breath of fire, which is fire, then you got the claws, which is earth, and then if you put all those together, it's the quintessence. It's the 5th element combined. So a dragon represents the alchemical 5 elements. It represents the upward facing pentagram, right? So the star of sovereignty, right? And or you could use the quintessence as the dragon rider, the person who rides the dragon, who is a cooperative agent of those elemental powers in nature. Because if you're bold, great powers will come to your aid. That's the main thing that I wanted to say, is that if you're bold and you get out there and you do this, you will have universal aid behind you. The universe will come in and provide you with the things that you need if you're willing to listen, if you're willing to see those things, and if you're willing to put those things into action. So I think that's really important. So try it out for yourself, obviously, right? See what works, apply this in your own life, think through it and apply it and see what works for you as well. Because, not every path of self-recovery is going to be the same, because we all don't suffer from the same things. So to cure psychopathologies, you really got to have an opportunistic mindset. You got to look at all the opportunities that you have. You got to look at all your tools to really figure out which ones are working for you, So I think that's really important to understand as well. It's not just a linear path for everybody to just be like, oh, I found self-love. Well, now what do I do? Or did I actually even find self-love? It's like, well, you got to figure out what's going to work for you to get you into that proper, healthy mindset of homeostasis with your body, with your mind, and with nature. So I think that's really important to understand.
Yep, it is. It takes time, and I think that's it's where many people fall off the path is they don't give themselves the time to to go to do the journey. They don't give
Yeah.
themselves enough time. They see, and this is, I know I keep bringing this type of stuff up, but this is another way that the dark occult controlling class, the ruling class, this is the kind of mode of thinking that they want you in. That's everything is, very delivered to you very, very quickly in their world. The artificial world, everything is delivered extremely quick. And that puts you in this kind of way of expecting results quickly with everything. And the results of what we're talking about are not quick. You have to give yourself time, and it has an extreme amount of patience for yourself and with yourself is required to be doing this work. And I really hope that we get to talk again sometime, Brandon. I really do, because you brought out a lot of good information. You helped extremely a lot with this conversation tonight, man. And I really appreciate your time and all the effort that you put into doing the great work. You've for sure inspired me, and I want to say it to your face about the Seed conference that you put on last year. Is showed me straight up that an online conference could be pulled off in the manner in which you guys chose to do it was fantastic and brilliant. And I drew a lot of inspiration from that when it comes to doing the online conference that Joe Murray and I are organizing. In fact, when we started organizing it, we were toying with the idea of actually doing it in person. We had to come to the conclusion, of course, that it would be very, very expensive to do so. And one of the first things I said was, well, Brandon Martin and the guys over at Seed did it online. We can do it online. We just have to figure out how. And, we have. So thank you very much, man, for all the hard work that you've been doing, and that you continue to do, because you're really good at it, and it's awesome.
Yeah, thank you for that compliment. Absolutely. And that's what the Seed conference is for, I was hoping that it would take off like a brush fire, I hoped everybody would start doing it, and that seems to be the case. Yeah, it's really expensive to put on physical events, and so I hope to get back to that one day. I'm definitely kind of, dancing around that idea, because I definitely want to get people in person. That's so important to get people in person. But for now, yeah, we're going to continue to do the online events, and Seed 5 will be coming out May of next year. So I am in organization of that. I am in preparation for that. We're calling it Fluorescence. So we're kind of adding some symbolism there, because, it's all about planting seeds of truth, and it takes time for that to develop. It takes time for it to actually come to full, fruition, and to actually get your harvest from that. So like you talked about, you have to be patient with everything that you do, and have the diligence to continue to persevere through any kind of issues. Like with this podcast today, I had some internet issues. My camera was freezing off and on, but you just got to keep going through it. You just got to keep pushing through it, and not allow that to knock you down. You don't allow it to upset you. You just do what you can, you work with it, and you keep moving forward. And that's how it's been with the conference. That's how it's been with the Cubbyhole. But yeah, you can find my work for anybody who's interested. You can go to seedtruth.com. You can also find it at the Cubbyhole website. That's cubbyhole.com, CUBBYWHOLE.com. And you can also find it on the onegreatworknetwork.com as well. You can find my content on there. So
I'll make sure to provide links for all of that. And that way it's just a click away from the show notes for people to go and find all of that. We'll kind of eternalize it, little time capsule. And, you know,
Yeah.
anyways, dude, it's been a fucking hell of a night, man. Thank you so much. And, you know, please, everyone out there, you know, indulge yourself, go over and find more of Brandon's work. Please. It is fantastic. I really highly suggest that you find the Fake Ass Punks presentation that he gave and really pay attention to that. That was a fantastic presentation, man. And it had me going, yeah, I know people like that. I know people like that, you know, because like I've been skateboarding, you know, I'm no good at skateboarding. I'll be straight up honest about that. I'm no good, but I can stay on the board. I can do a kickflip. So that's good. That's good enough, you know. I can drop in on a 10-foot vert. I'm not afraid of that kind of stuff. It's okay with me, you know, but I grew up in a little bit of a punk scene and a skate punk scene and everything. And I'll tell you, man, when I heard your presentation about Fake Ass Punks, I was like, I know so many people that are like this, and it kind of made me sad.
Right.
But hey, it's okay.
Yep, it is. It's meant to help heal people, you know. It'll probably piss you off at first or make you upset, but you know, it's there to help people in their own endeavors. So, oh yeah, and I would love to come back on and talk with you again anytime, man. Just shoot me a message and we'll get it worked out. So,
yep, you have an open door policy. You do, as far as I'm concerned. I have a lot of friends. We're friends now, so deal with it. And you know, I have a lot of friends. I tell that, you know, you got an open door policy. Come on anytime. If you know, like, I'll make room for you, and we can always, you know, figure out something, man. So yeah, it's not a problem at all. I can't wait till the next time we get to speak. So I'll be looking forward to it. Anyone out there still listening, my name is James Cordiner, and you can go to my website, freeyourmindne.com, and go to shatteringtheillusion.info. You know, wherever you're watching this, you know, like it, subscribe to it, whatever you got to do, and you know, and help spread the word, because we all got to help each other in these tough times, and make sure that you're out there practicing what you preach and doing your best. Do the best that you can to learn this stuff and to apply it to your life. And it's a very hard effort, but it takes strength and wisdom to know the difference between right and wrong and to actually act according. So with that being said, I got nothing left, and I love you all, and I'll see you next week.